And we are live. Gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Mecca of Banter podcast. The podcast where sometimes we talk about good things and sometimes we don't. And tonight is one of those episodes where we're talking about a not good thing, which is St. Louis City's 2025 season. It is our official season review from the Mecca of Banter podcast. We're going to dive into the good, the bad, and downright ugly of 2025. That was St. Louis City season. As always, it's your boy Hen. You can find me on Twitter at HenryWind. It's a great week to be a Manchester United fan. Now, fellas, I feel like we say this every week. That is an international break. International break sucks. It's just so bad. And even in games where like there's absolute limbs, Ireland scoring, in the 90 whatever minute yesterday to win. I still just can't get down with an international break. I try so hard to be bought into the games. I just literally can't do it. But let's meet the fellas. Let's hear how you're doing. And let's give a special shout out to Nick Haflinger, who is married on Friday and is on his honeymoon right now. Hell yeah, Nick. Congratulations, buddy. And we'll catch you next week. But let's check in with Lucas Winkleman. How you doing, bud?
What's up, boys? Good. I think you hit the nail on the head when mentioning that there are good things and bad things, and I was gonna butt in there and say I'm almost positive this specific episode is gonna have very few good things, if any, into it. So not the best pod for the mental to kind of be thinking about everything that's gone on this season, but it's good to be here with you too. So
That's so beautiful. Thanks for saying that. Andy Hoover, what's going on, man?
Boys, doing well. Yeah, no, who would we be if we didn't go through a season review, right? Like who would we be to the city of St. Louis? These people are begging for
Counting on us.
I know it. They're just beating down the door for the Mecca of Banter's thoughts on the 2024-2025 MLS St. Louis City season. But yeah, happy to be here. Always a good time. It's always fun talking about the local, but hopefully we get better. That's all.
Hopefully we get better. That's all. That's true. Very true. At a later time, we'll talk about the schedule changes that are coming to the MLS in the 2027 season. It's going to be so good for the league. And, for one of the first times in my lifetime, I feel pretty hopeful about like the future of the MLS program, I guess, with like USL getting promotion relegation, us going to like the more European style of calendar. I don't know. Who knows? It may happen in our lifetime to where we see a pretty competitive league. But we're not here to talk about the MLS at large. We're here to talk about St. Louis City. So, gentlemen, we're going to start off with just give me your one sentence vibe on the 2025 season. If you just could like bottom line it on how you're feeling. It could be a sentence. It could be a word. How are you feeling about the 2025 season as a whole?
Hoove?
Dude, hopelessly lost.
Cat emoji that's just like, yeah.
I mean, like, hopelessly lost with minimal hope for the future. Like, it sucks to just lead this in like that, but like, we have not done anything top to bottom. That's really getting me excited for next season. We drag our feet on everything. We've got presidents making sporting business decisions, completely unfilled roster currently. Not that we had an amazing roster last year either, I don't think. But yeah, man, it's just it's going to be hard for me to not have existential dread through this entire thing because it's just not a lot going here.
Not good. Winks, how about you? When you think about the 2025 season, what do you think of?
Yeah, for me, I feel like a sentence that could sum this up is that the honeymoon is over, and maybe it ended way earlier than, I'm just now bringing this up, but I think that we as a club took such a huge step backwards, after several promises throughout the last year and a half of momentum and building. It felt like things unraveled more than they were built up, which I think also sums up, what Hoover said about having an empty roster of sorts.
The honeymoon phase being over, I feel like is a perfect summation of how not only this group is feeling, but the city of St. Louis at large. When it comes to St. Louis City, we saw like cracks in the veil for probably the first time as a collective fan base. It's funny. You think back to season 1, 2023, City could do no wrong. I mean, from the product on the field to like the block parties before the games, like they were getting talent, they were getting, just they were making all the right decisions. And now, fast forward 2 years, 3 years, you see like the St. Louis City dropping like an update to their app to incorporate AI, and you see Twitter fucking losing their minds, man. It's like the honeymoon phase is for sure over. And for me, if I have to think about the 2025, if I have to think about, the 2025 season, just disappointment is kind of like the cut and dry word, and potentially even sentence that I feel, starting from the beginning of the season, we went through the back half of 2024 season with an interim manager because, we fired Bradley Carnell, who lo and behold just won Coach of the Year with the Philadelphia Union. So that feels really good. But we had an interim coach, and finally after the season was over, we go out and we get our guy Olaf Melberg. We go into the season, and I remember this crew in particular was pretty excited. We have what we knew of at the time. We have a former Premier League Serie A international defender in Olaf Melberg for the Swedish national team. We're excited about that. He had relatively good success in his former clubs, but defensive stability was the main thing that we thought he was going to bring. And from a group of defenders on this podcast, we were very excited about that. When we looked at 2024, we were leaking goals right, left, and center. And so we went into this season with a pretty good amount of optimism. And we had reasons to feel optimistic. Celio got signed to a good contract. We had Melberg coming in. Hopefully we got to see the return of Leuven and Klaus and Berkey at their very best. Hopefully we were going to see some pretty good minutes out of Nilsson. We were going to see some good things. And we finished with 8 wins, 8 draws, and 18 losses. And we finished yet again the better half of the season, not just the back half. We finished the last 22 games of the season with an interim manager that led us to 13th in the Western Conference, 24th in the MLS, and a negative 14 goal differential. And that's just not very good, gentlemen. It's just not very good. And I'm struggling to even think of, season 1, the energy drink football, the high press, the counter attack. I'm struggling even to say like what our identity was this season.
I think that was a big part of it. Going into this season, both fans and media were expecting a team that's going to start this season. All right, let's get back into the playoff mix, attack under pressure, and build that identity that we had in that first season. And we got the polar opposite. And I think a big chunk of that was the rest of the MLS kind of got caught up in a way. I know not that's not completely true because that first season we got knocked in the first round of playoffs, but that team would be a contender, and I think that getting knocked in the first round of our first season was slightly a fluke knowing how we played the entire regular season, but I think the rest of the MLS just kind of got caught up and we got so badly exposed. And yes, we made a couple mid-season or a couple signings throughout the season that bolstered our roster a little bit, but I still think there was so much work to do that we were sort of behind the 8 ball from the get-go. And having an interim manager and doing all these other things, not having a sporting director for a while just didn't help our case either.
Dude, specifically, I think Dobes, Hen, and I were watching preseason games. And we're sickos.
God, at the Coachella Valley tournament or whatever.
Valley, it was like someone's mom recording on the broadcast. We were watching these preseason games, and I think there wasn't a ton. You can't pull a ton from those. The one thing that I pulled immediately was how much clock Kyle Hebert was getting.
Yes.
So immediately, I was like, something's up with that. We brought in, this Wallum cat who's supposedly a pretty solid left wing back. Made sense being kind of that going forward wing back if we were going to play back 5. We had coverage, and Totland was coming off of a good season the previous year. But we're just sticking with our guy Kyle Hebert, and nothing against the man. Great guy, and rooting for him obviously, but we can't. That was day one. I was like, something's up with that. Didn't like it. And then we went into the season 0-0, a fluke 3-0 road win, which was the first and only road win we had until the last 5 games of the season, which was also another fluke. And then we pulled off, a 1-0 win at home, which I thought was a gutsy performance against Seattle. So, you're not watching the energy drink fun style forward pressing football that we want and have had in the past and anticipate at the club, but you're churning results. And, the defense looks good. You don't give up a goal in 4 games. That's awesome. We talk about this all the time. Defense wins championships and puts 3 points on the board. We then go 7 games without a win.
It was brutal.
And a couple that we could have, and getting embarrassed in Kansas City. We don't win until the Open Cup against Omaha. So if you take that out, that's 11 straight not 3-point results.
Yeah.
And that was when it just blew up. I mean, the whole thing, everyone was ready for Olaf's neck. Then it started to be rumblings of, is Lutz also on the chopping block?
Mm-hmm.
And we got through a majority of the season, and they axed him at the weirdest time, in my opinion. But it was just top to bottom after the first 4 games, not good. Mm-hmm. And then Critchley comes in, and you halfway, it's like, what do you expect Critchley to do?
Right.
Like, he was saying all the right things in the media. He had, City 2 absolutely buzzing. It was definitely more front foot football, and what the team knew how to do and how to play. It was less rigid tactics that I think Mr. Olaf came in with. So you get a little bit of a spark, but like the season was gone again already come July.
Yeah.
And that is 2 seasons in a row. 3, if you really think about it. Our first season, the fall off we had going into the playoffs was damning.
Yeah, it was bad.
So we just have not put together a full season yet, and that's the bare minimum expectation, is to make the playoffs. Like, we've got 18 teams in the playoffs in the wonkiest, stupidest playoff format I've ever seen in my entire life. But you just got to be there. Like, any given day, you can give yourself an opportunity to win and move on. And it's 3 matches, and you take them or you leave them. So I don't even know what we were talking about before this, but I just kind of went in on my own disappointing aspect and overhead view kind of what we had happen.
And it's funny that you bring up the whole Kyle Hebert thing, because I almost blocked that out of my memory. And as you were talking about results early in the season, I went back and kind of looked at some of those starting 11s. We relied on Kyle Hebert and Akil Watts for the first half of the season. Akil Watts clocked more minutes than anyone in our team for the first several games. When managers come in, they make selections for a number of reasons. You never really know unless you have an insider information, which we definitely do not have. But it was really difficult to understand why these decisions were being made. Also, to call a spade, one of the first big things that happened this season was Kessler got injured for several games. And we were incredibly high on Kessler last year at the end of the season, and we were expecting big things out of him this season. And for him to go down, that was also when we started giving up our shutout record. So there's that. But flukes, you mentioned that there was flukes of, not letting up a goal for the first couple of games, but then there was a fluke of not winning an away game for 80%, 85% of the season as well. So that's different, but it wasn't all lows. I will say there were a couple of highs throughout the season, and I encourage you both to dig deep and find something that, was a high for you throughout this season. And whether that was a result, whether that was a win, if you felt like maybe someone had a good season, about bounce back season, a good transfer. Was there any moment that stands out, or anything that stands out from the season last year, or I guess this year, that you can look at as a high? We'll get to the lows again, but are there any highs that ring true for you both?
I think there's a couple guys that we can feel more confident in going into next year than we were coming in this year. I think question marks were around, Hartle. Not necessarily that we didn't trust him or believe in his ability, because we saw it at the end of last season. But, he not only stepped up in the absence of Lowen as an 8, but he would come in off of the wing sometimes. He was wearing the captain's band. He had a fantastic end of the season with a couple highlight worldy goals. I think, my favorite takeaway as a positive is that there's a world where Edward Lewin doesn't play for this team. Maybe next year, maybe in 3 years, maybe he retires with us. Who knows? But if it's in the short term that we don't see him again, I feel extremely confident in Marcel Hartl. And Berkey's your captain. Obviously, you're never going to change that. And he's another guy that I'm glad to have going into next season. DP status, I don't know, a little interesting, but he's proven it that he deserves it, and it makes a lot of sense to just keep him in. But there seems to be a little bit more of a leadership core than just relying on Lowen and just relying on Berkey. Like those two guys, Lowen's your field general. He's going to be in the conversations with the referees. He's going to be, talking to guys and really quarterbacking the whole thing because Berkey just can't from the backside of the pitch. But knowing Marcel, one, has the quality that we all know he has, and being able to see it was great. And then Klaus, dude.
Yep.
I'm just so happy that he hit 10 goals. And, 3 of them in one game. First ever hat trick I think we've had. So that was electric. 90th minute screamer to seal that. I was so happy for him, and he's not consistent, right? He's still obviously pretty inconsistent, but all we ask for in a starting 9 is 10 goals a season. Obviously we want more. 10 is the bare minimum. So I feel good with those two guys being in the positions they are and not having to go find someone to fill those positions. We'll get there because we have a million other positions to fill. But taking the positives of 2 of our better players really coming pretty good this season and knowing that you've got them next year, everyone feels better about that.
Yeah. On my little list here, I had shouting out those 2 for 9 and 10 goals respectively, but I guess to pivot to something different, when we talked about what we wanted to talk about in this episode, like you two, I kind of went through our run of games, and while the season as a whole was, super, super, super disappointing, we grabbed 10 of the final 15 points available from our last run of games, and I think that, at the very least, heading into, the end of the season where we know we weren't going to make playoffs, that was a positive for those 5 matches. We looked closer to the team that the fans think they can be. So that was a bright spot for me. And then I guess to name a player specifically that isn't those 2, who have you touched on sort of leadership outside of, Berkey and Lewin. I think that in the back line, Baumgartel can be that as well. I think that, even though our back line as a whole was brutal, I know that you guys watched a lot more of these games this year than I was able to, but I know that you guys have talked about his positive individual performances. So, I think that having someone with that Bundesliga experience and being able to build around, him in the back, Hartl in the middle, and so on up the field, I think that, we do have a couple key leadership pieces in every phase of the field that we can build around. But I think that his leadership in the back specifically was sort of a cut above, everybody else that we were putting in back there.
And unfortunately, that bar's pretty low.
It is. It didn't take much.
No, it didn't take much, and he still has like the errant mistake in him as well. Like I don't know.
So does Saliba and Gabriel though. So all the greats have them.
When I was thinking about highs, one moment that just like stood out to me was when Mick Sorley came in and scored 2 towards the end of the season against San Jose. Like that was huge. He went on a run at the end of the season where he was playing a lot. He was scoring. He kind of felt like Betcher felt when he first came in. Was just like getting these goals, and it was big.
Nothing to lose.
Absolutely nothing to lose. And I want to call out as well Hartl and Klaus. I was really. I honestly felt like for the majority of the season, Klaus could hold his head high with just about every performance. We've said it for 3 years now that he adds more to the team than just goals and assists. He does so much for the team, but consistency, like you said, Hoof, like that's the main thing that we need out of him. And I felt like we saw a really consistent Joao Klaus throughout the entire year, and a healthy Joao Klaus too. Like he remained healthy for the majority of the season, which was really big. But unfortunately, there just weren't too many moments throughout the season where I really felt like we had those moments of hope. I think through, and we'll get to signings in a little bit, but, I remember we signed Falu Fall, and we saw a couple comps of him. We saw some stats on him. I was so stoked about it. But then like you also see, he just turns his brain off at times of the season. Then, he went through a big period when he came to the team, he didn't even play at all. And so like, was really confused by that. But, let's get into the lows a little bit. It's funny that our highs segment was 4 minutes, but it is what it is on a season like this. But the lows, you mentioned earlier, Hoover, that, kind of after the first 4 games or so, we went on just this horrendous run of 11, non-wins minus the Union Omaha game. What do you think it was? Like, when you look at it, of course, there's a new coach, there's a new system. Like we were playing 3 in the back or 5 in the back, however you want to look at that for the majority of it. But like, is it what Lucas said, that like teams just figured us out, or like what was it that you felt like was so bad? Because I mean, not only were the results bad, it was also the vibe was horrible in the stadium, in the fan base. Like it was, I mean, I think it was the lowest point we've had as a club in those first 15 games of the season this year.
Was that stretch during the time when Critchley took over?
No, it was Olaf.
It was Olaf.
It was all Olaf. Okay.
It's hard to like you said when we started, dude. I don't know what our plan was with Critchley or Olaf. Like at least Olaf, you knew it was, we're gonna sit in a low block and hit you on the counter. So fine, whatever. We weren't hitting anybody on the counter. We hit on the Sunday afternoon game, 3rd game of the season, and we looked great because they were terrible. Yeah. So like you could see the game plan at least a little bit with Olaf, but we didn't. We scored 1 goal in the next, after Seattle, 1 goal in 5. That's not going to fly with the city of St. Louis, the fans, the stadium, the atmosphere. That's immediately what's going to mess with everything on the field. So, and then you bring in Critchley, this is his first, major head professional management job. He's an interim manager. He just wanted the guys to play a little bit more free, understand, great. But no, we didn't know, I think, through the entirety of the rest of the season, what that was supposed to look like. Yeah. Like we saw a little bit of a press here and there, contextual pressing, but it didn't work out. Loose defensive decisions. The back 4 we all felt was better and more suited to us. Like it's so weird to look at because it doesn't ever feel like there was one specific moment. Like obviously, we get clapped up away at Seattle and you fire your manager. Like, okay, so done. First clean break. That's good. Bring in this new guy. We'll figure it out from here. And, he just didn't. And the team didn't. You can only put so much of this on a manager's shoulders. Obviously, they're the ones that are responsible for, turning it around and setting game plans and putting out lineups. But the players didn't rally either. We didn't really get that new manager bounce. So it's tough to really pull out one moment of the season to me that was like, yeah, this is it. Once we hit that, winter break or the summer break thing, whenever that was, and which was when we fired Carnell in the 2nd season with the expectation of turning it around. We did it a little bit earlier than we fired Carnell, so we were all like, okay, we learned from our mistake on that front. Yeah. We make another couple signings and we make a push. Push never happened. It just all, flamed out. So there's no specific spot to me, but it was like, come early August, we'd all pretty much written off the playoffs. And that one to me was like, I couldn't give my tickets away, dude. I was just eating.
I lost a lot of money this year.
Yeah, because no one wanted to go, and I got it. Like I understood why people didn't. So realizing we weren't going to make the playoffs after making the right moves given the circumstances. I think for me, that one was like, all right, well, let's hope we end well and spin it up again next year.
It's funny whenever you get some time away from it, and fortunately, we've had a couple months now, or a month or so, 2 months, whatever
October
it's been.
18th, last game.
Yeah. So literally a month, almost to the
Yep.
day that we've been recording. It almost and I'm trying not to catastrophize it because I think that would just not be beneficial for the sake of the podcast, but it almost feels like from the beginning, the front office just really royally fucked this one up. The appointment of Melberg, and then I felt if it was a low block and counterattack, we didn't have a counterattacking outlet like you mentioned. So if we were going to spring someone on the counter, we don't have, and I know that these players won't exist in the MLS quality, but you think of someone like Martinelli for Arsenal. If you're throwing that ball forward, he's going to hawk it down. He's going to stretch the back line. Rashford's very much that way was that way for Manchester United. There is an outlet there. With St. Louis City, there was none of that. And so the roster construction made no sense. And then you really start to get skeptical quickly with how quickly they fired the guy that they spent all of this time appointing, because again, Hackworth took over for half of a season. So they could have been interviewing people. They could have been deciding this for 6 months, and they still chose this guy. But then they brought in guys supposedly for this system. Jake Girdwood Reich. They brought in, I can't even remember who else, but I remember they brought in at one point Xande Silva. They brought him in at the roster deadline day, hopefully to give us a spark, which what a failure of a signing that was. He was signed and transferred out in the same season. That's horrendous. And so I do I do question for the both of you. We can obviously say that there hasn't been a head coach yet to really sink his teeth in and have lasting success at this club, but where are you both at with the front office? Obviously, Lutz was let go a month and a half ago, but when you think about the ownership group and the people kind of pulling the strings behind the scene, where are you with that?
That's a weird one.
Yeah.
I think there's a rift between ownership to Diego to sporting director. And I remember we brought Diego in, and Citigroup guy and businessman and things that were not sporting. We're like, all right, cool. That sounds good. He ultimately definitely played a role in getting Lutz sacked. I think there's no way he didn't. And then I think he's kind of thrust himself in this sporting decision role. I don't love any of that, and I'm not sure where Carolyn Betts is seeing the positivity out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think, I don't think it's fair to say that they won't spend money. They will spend money, and it has to make sense contextually. It has to make sense within the roster. I'm not sitting here saying, well, we're not spending any money. It's the owners again, because we do. Fall was a pretty big time transfer, and Teutcher and Hartle last season, and we've brought in some quality, and they've paid for it. So it's such a weird, where do they, Carolyn said at the very beginning of the year, the absolute minimum this year is to make the playoffs. We weren't even in a sniffing chance.
No.
So what's the conversation next season? We have to make the playoffs. Yeah, we do. What are you going to do to make sure that happens? And this Diego Cat has so far not, I don't really know what he's supposed to be doing, but he's making big decisions now. We bring in Corey Ray, who on paper makes a lot of sense, is someone who we feel can put together a competent MLS roster. We still don't have a manager. We're probably not going to have a manager for a while.
Yeah.
So it's just serious. I feel that Carolyn and ownership are serious about this team being good, but they need someone to help them make some of these decisions, because
they don't know how.
Right.
They don't know how.
Well, I mean, a lot of them haven't been, outside of starting St. Louis City, none of them have really been that involved in it. Yeah, and And I remember back when, they fired Lutz, and I pulled up the article just to, remember it word for word, but the front office publicly admitted that the team hasn't been able to meet the expectations of, the fans during that departure. And I feel like in firing a coach or, a sporting director, typically like the front office itself doesn't take any sort of blame. Typically it's like, we had disagreements with this manager, or, we just didn't see things going, the way that we wanted. But like our front office full on went out and said like, we're not doing a good enough job, and it's not like fully on Lutz. And I think that in itself signals how that gap is real and just how big it is. So,
Yeah.
and we know that the supporters, including us, have been feeling that way the entirety of the season. But it felt to me like they were trying to put a band-aid on something for a reason unbeknownst to me, when, Hen, like you said, we did have those 6 months to start conversations with other people. And it almost felt like the front office kind of gave up on the team to an extent, in the back half of the season, and
I feel like
sort
they
of
did
wrote
for
them
sure.
off. Yeah.
You either burn it all down and start over, or you stick with what you've got, and they didn't do either.
Yeah.
Like we sacked the coach, who I imagine Lutz was very instrumental in signing. I don't blame Olaf for lying in his job interview. Everybody does, but you've got to vet. Like, you've got to make sure that you know what you're gonna get. And Lutz was also one of those guys that was on the bench and giving information and giving thoughts and feedback to Olaf, who wasn't doing anything about it. So if Lutz was a major contributing factor in the hiring of him, you sack him 10 games in. And if Lutz was a part of that too, then fine. But maybe sack him then and start over. Like, if we're calling this season a wash, they obviously thought, after the 12 game skid we went on and we fired Olaf, there's still something to save, right? And I think that we saw that. But we see in sports all the time, like, especially American sports, tanking for the draft type thing. There's no reason to go out and make some of those selling team type moves. Like, if we're gonna do this and we're gonna try and focus on next year, then make some tough decisions. Get rid of guys that we know are good and quality, but we need to bring something in for next year. We didn't do that either. It was just so stagnant that, Lucas, that point, I think you're 100% right. Is that I think they're just out of their depth from an ownership standpoint, and they're just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing if it sticks.
And maybe that's why, bringing on this, this Corey Gray cat is one of those, instant, like one of the more intelligent decisions, because we talked about it, whenever we first announced his signing, and we did our, background research on him, and, what he was able to do, at Columbus and Montreal with, a very small budget. My only worry is that, we see it as that, we're excited because we see someone that can do a lot with a little, or did a lot with a little, and hope they can replicate that here. And my worry within that is that, unfortunately, that the ownership group, or the front office, sees it the same way and anticipates us not having a lot of money to play with in general anyways, which worries me that they're not, going to be putting enough money into the club to make it worth it. And, that scares me into, seeing this club into a continuing downward spiral, because, as we know with our Premier League clubs, there are times of rebuild where our teams just need to, pump money into it, in several directions. And that's not adding AI to their team's app. That's, that's coaching and filling the gaps in the roster. And so, I guess to echo on the front office piece, signing Corey in theory is a good idea, but it worries me that they're not planning to put enough money into the club where it needs to be put in, to make these drastic changes that we all obviously are petitioning for.
My only, if I'm looking at it as a glass half full kind of thing, the only thing that I can see as like, okay, maybe there's hope here, is that we genuinely don't have a full roster right now. Like, we let go of a lot of guys. So like, we have to sign people. We don't have any other option but to do that. And so, of course, there's going to be like the screaming out, calling out for, and this will transition us perfectly into the 2026 conversation and what holes we need and, who we want to sign. But of course, there's going to be the fans like us that are going to be like crying out for some DP caliber signings in a couple of positions, a left wing, a six, maybe even a center back, whatever you want to say. And with knowing that we need to sign like 10 guys, we may not pull the trigger on it. And so is it going to be kind of that Moneyball mentality where it's like you're trying to find the right fit for the lowest price possible rather than going out and getting like a surefire player? I don't know. But it just feels like the front office, there was question marks in 2024 about incompetence. And in 2025, it was solidified that they have no idea what the fuck they're doing. And so this is, a Henry Wind take, not necessarily a Mecca of Banter take, but I'll give it until probably summer of 2026. And if it's still not better, I think St. Louis as a city will be calling for them to sell the club because like, it's just, it's like we're going to be petitioning out there. Just
my God. It's just football heritage is what it is.
Pitchforks and
Kindle out.
Kindle out until it's backwards, bro.
Until it's backwards.
Yeah. So we'll see that. But let's transition to 2020 upcoming season, and we'll kind of finish out with our final rankings of the season as well as some awards if we can issue out some rewards. But when you think through 2020 and the roster construction that's necessary, I want to first call out we chose not to pick up quite a few guys options. Some names, we have Zielinski, who we signed out of the draft last year, which low-key I was kind of surprised that we didn't extend his contract, but he also got loaned out the back half of the season. Devin Paddleford, who was a loan anyway. Vollum, who was a loan, which kills me to see him leave the club. I thought he was a bright spot. Henry Kessler, we did not extend, which I hope to God we are, trying to sign in the background of this. We did not extend Seth Antwi from City 2, Jaden Reed, Selmier Pedro, Ben Lunt, and then we re-signed him a week ago. Akil Watts, Alfredo Morales, Rasmus Alm, and Michael Wenzel. So quite a few guys that are no longer on our roster, and that still is Jake Woodreich is still out on loan as well. So quite a few holes that we need to fill heading into the 2026 season. What to you all? And, I also want to give a big shout out to Chat City Tactics, our favorite Twitter, what do you want to call him? Data nerd for St. Louis City? What's his official title? Yeah, whatever.
I think you'd like that.
Shout out Michael. But Michael wrote a really, really, really good article about like basically the 2025 heading into 2026 roster audit of St. Louis City. I would deeply encourage you to read it, to dissect it, because he just breaks it down like the brass tacks of like literally the numbers of what we have in each position. There are some numbers that we don't need to touch. We are like fine in those positions. And then there are some positions that are really worrying. And of course, he always offers the what would Michael do in this scenario. And I appreciate that about this article. But this is not the What Would Michael Do podcast. This is the Mecca of Banter podcast. So Lucas Winkleman, Andy Hoover, when you think about the 2 to 3 positions of need on the field, like what are your top priorities heading into 2026?
Sign Kessler. What the hell are we doing, brother? And you want to talk about incompetence in the front office. If that doesn't happen, you're deluded. He was, hands down, one of the best players on the team. He's your consistent, everyday, field general starting center back. You pair him next to this new talent who he can learn from. It's a high-powered center back pairing. Mm-hmm. The fact that we haven't done that is unbelievable to me. And I don't care if that's a Corey Ray decision or a Diego or a Carolyn decision. Everyone in the stadium knows that he was our best defensive player. Yeah. And I don't think it's a question. Correct. So, for one, let's start there. If I have to watch Josh Yarrow or Kyle Hubert play center back ever again, I'm gonna be sick, dude. I'm
Yeah,
over it.
Just to call it out for what it is, it was also announced this week that Josh Yarrow extended his contract, which, stoked for him, stoked for Josh.
I love Josh.
The guy, as Twitter has just been such a funny place over the last week where, whenever that was announced, it was basically, I saw a bunch of responses of like, if you were so disappointed in the roster construction from Lutz, why are you re-signing the guys that,
statistically, some of the worst defender, some of the worst performances we had last year were with Josh Yarrow on the field. And we love the guy, that's the thing with this MLS stuff. You're closer to everyone, so you don't want to drag as hard as you think you can. But dude, that's just a zero ambition re-signing, in my opinion. And he could have gone anywhere and been a center back's, backup for whoever. He's an MLS journeyman and can make it that way. But just delusional to use a roster spot, in my opinion, on that. Like, bring in the youth, dude, or something.
Yeah, it surprised me, like, even from a roster construction standpoint, like, Kessler is also in my top 3 priorities. Like, it makes no sense why he is not, of all the people, it makes no sense unless he's asking for some absurd amount of money, which I can't imagine that he is. We're still paying guys that we have no business paying, but Kessler is up there for me. I'll give one more position that we desperately need. We need a 6. We need someone who's going to be a center midfielder. Again, just to call out
a winning center fielder.
Yes. Yeah. Like,
doesn't have to be the crazy, technically gifted. Yeah. We just need like a destroyer in the middle.
And unfortunately, like, Alfredo Morales, if we got Alfredo Morales 5-6 years ago, I would be stoked about that signing. Like, he's a player. He has great tactical awareness. He can spray it past, but he's really defensively sound. His legs are just gone, though. He's like 34 years old, 35 years old. He just can't do it. But for me, so I'll say Kessler and then signing a 6. I agree with you, Lucas. They do not need to be like the progressive ball carrying center midfielder that takes it off of the center backs and drives it all the way forward. We don't need that.
Because we've got the guy in the middle that does that.
Right.
Yeah.
You win the ball, roll it to Edward Lumen. That's it. And then we go. And
what also, kills me to say too is Chris Durkin is not that guy like I thought he was going to be when he came in. He's not, I would say, like tactically aware enough to stay, what's it called? Like to stay like
positional awareness in general.
Perfect. Yeah. That's the perfect way of saying it. He drifts too much in other positions. And then on the ball, he doesn't have enough quality to even just make the simple passes consistently. So, and we have one more year of him on his current contract, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's a player that we can use as a pawn to make some shifts. But so we have Kessler, we have a 6. Lucas, what are you looking at in this lineup as a spot?
I'm trying to think of something different since we kind of already talked about it, but I think because we talked about it means that, it was an important piece that we didn't have. And I think that, whether it's on the right or the left wing, a counter-attacking winger with pace and the ability to take on, wing backs one-on-one. I feel like, from the games I was able to watch, and obviously the the pods where we dive into tactics of specific games, we lean way too heavily on Klaus and wing play from our fullbacks, that because we don't have anybody up in those corners that's able to do the daring things and stretch defenders in the way that as you mentioned Rashford and Martinelli do for their clubs. So I think we have wingers who are more technical in the middle of the field than they are on the outside.
Yeah.
I just want someone that's either going to run to the end line with the ball, without the ball, stretch them, and either cross the ball in or try and take on those defenders one-on-one. Because some of our wingers, Pompeu being one of them, Celio being another, they have
same person. Same guy.
Sorry, I'm drunk. He has flashes of that, but obviously injuries have prevented him from being stable in that position, and we never had anybody consistently stretching the pitch. So we naturally stayed way too compact. As we pushed up the field, sort of suffocated ourselves. And so for me, outside of those two very important pieces that you guys mentioned, I would say, a true winger with pace.
Yeah, and I want the winger to be DP status.
Yeah.
I want
Hell yeah,
I
man.
want
That's such a DP position.
That's what we
Yes.
want. Yes.
Yeah, because I even think about some of the like notable sixes around the league who are not DP status or guys that came through an academy and they're great. Like I think about Aiden Morris, who's now over in the championship. I even think about Christian Roldan. Like he doesn't need to be in the U.S. men's national team, but he's solid. Darlington
I'd
Nagby,
take
who
him
just
now.
retired. Like Jack McGlynn, who's down at Houston. Like all those guys are, all of those guys are U.S. products, but they don't need a DP title. But a winger, like I want Denny Bwanga.
Yeah.
5 years ago, like I want that
yeah.
kind of player who, like, you don't really need him to come back on defense, but when he gets the ball at his feet, he's the most electric player in the league. Like that's the kind of signing I want us to make, and I'm not sure that we will, because I have some pretty big question marks as well. Like, you can forget that he exists, but Cedric Teuchert is still like on our roster. We didn't see the guy hardly at all last year, and when we did see him, he was probably the most frustrating player on our roster. And so is there anyone, we mentioned Durkin, is there anyone that you all are looking at on our active roster currently as someone who you think that we will ship off in a deal of some sort, in a trade of some sort? Is there anyone that you're looking at that you think that that's going to happen?
I think Ostrak makes a lot of sense to Dish. He's been on the team for a long time.
He's also really
good
highly
money.
paid. Yeah.
Yeah, he makes good money on the team. He's also not consistent, and is kind of another one of those polarizing characters that, you can see the flashes here and there, but it never really stuck with him, and he never really solidified a place in the starting 11 even.
Yep.
So I think he's 25 still. I think there's talent there, absolutely. But I don't think that's a guy that you're going to sit on and be like, yep, he's next up to be our loan replacement, or like none of his positioning on this roster makes sense to me.
Yeah.
A guy that I hope we don't get rid of is Thomas Totland. We have not seen the Thomas Totland that we saw at the beginning of his time with St. Louis in a while, for an injury at one point and then getting froze out by Critchley as the other, which again, no clue, not an idea as to why that happened. But, Michael made a good point about him. Like, I would get if he wanted to leave. Are you kidding? Like he got out. We don't have a manager. The structure of the front office is in shambles. We're not a very attractive destination at the moment. So I could see them maybe cashing in on him as well. But that kind of brings me to another point. We don't have wingbacks currently.
I was gonna say, like, I know that we want to sign a 6 and we want to sign a left winger. We have to sign a left back because we actually don't have one on our roster.
Our short list is Orozco and Kyle Hebert.
Yeah.
Like, those are the guys that play a wingback in any capacity. So we got to get somebody there of some competence. And I don't think Padelford, whatever, was bad.
I don't think so.
I don't think he was great either. I wasn't super pressed about his loan being permanent. It's just a huge bummer on Wallum. You want to talk about a utility guy that gave it all for the badge in just a miserable season on loan? Like that, I loved him. I loved his attitude. I thought he was technically one of the better players that we had on the field every game. So if we don't re-sign him, like, it's a literal hole on the roster.
Yeah.
So that's definitely another big one to me.
Wallum he started games in like 6 different positions.
Yeah.
Which is a lot.
His on FOTMob, his position is right back, defensive mid, left wing back, left mid, attacking mid, right mid, center mid, left back.
So just everything.
That's 8 positions they've listed out.
Yeah, that's insane.
So if we need a wingback so bad, what about moving Akil? Because
he's gone already. We didn't re-sign him.
He was one of those people. All right.
Yeah. So he's and the thing is that's interesting is that like he got a huge chance this year under Melberg and Critchley. And both times they ended up not using him because he's just not up for it.
I feel like he also played out of position a lot, though.
Did.
Played everywhere.
Which
He played
is
everywhere. I mean, that was the thing. What was his position?
Right.
Yeah. But I feel the same way about Ostrak, where I'm like, okay, if you want to play that 8, you're not good enough to be a starting 8, but like you're better on the wing, but then you don't like playing on the wing. Like I
doesn't play defense.
Guys,
like
it is a bad thing sometimes to be too much of a utility piece.
Yeah, totally.
When
we're
in a situation where we need specialists in there, in these several positions.
Yep.
On the
Bring me
field.
a Ben Davies left back, dude.
Sure.
Like just a guy who can play consistent minutes and not get embarrassed in an MLS capacity, and he can whip a ball. Like I'm not, I'm not asking for much out of that role. Like Ben Davies is not good enough to be playing for Spurs. He's currently injured too, but like he was an okay Premier League left back. He would be a probably pretty decent MLS left back. Like that's like the bar though. You know what I mean? Like I want consistency in someone who's not going to get torched all the time, but someone who can complete a forward pass. That's all I'm asking for, dude.
It's funny. I'm like currently on transfer market. I'm looking at players who are out of contract at the moment who would be free transfers. Tamayasu, Arsenal legend, could come in and be our center back.
That makes a lot of sense.
Renan Lodi, who was just most recently with Nottingham Forest. Serge Reguilon is out of contract at the moment, which would be insane. That would be
He's
great.
Going to Miami.
How old is he?
28.
Yeah.
Still in his prime. Dele Alli is available. Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain is available.
Ox would be nuts.
Dude, I mean, that would be great. Like, if he could stay healthy with it
How old
as
is
well.
he?
Ox is 32.
Eesh.
I know, not good. But, long story short, there are definitely some things that could be done. And you never know. Like, unfortunately, I wish that we had better MLS knowledge as a whole, like in the league, because I'm sure that there are like players out there that are available or kind of like on the block that I just don't know about. But from the Mecca of Banter, we need a 6, a left wing,
a DP left wing. I don't want anything less than someone who's going to bag me goals off the wing.
And also, like, I'll call this out. Sang Bin, I know that like people are like high on him. I don't get it. I haven't seen anything yet to like be high on. For me, like the physical stats, I know that Michael wrote about it in his article. Like his physical stats are off the charts, and his running stats, I'm like, it just doesn't really matter to me. But if he's going to be our starting right winger, okay, sure. But like, we got to get a left winger. But
yeah,
I want to finish up, gentlemen, with some grades. We're going to grade A, B, C, D, F is how we're grading this. We're going to grade the attack, the midfield, the defense, the coaching staff, and then the front office for the season. Buckle in.
This report card would have my parents grounding me for months.
Okay, let's start off in the attack. What would you give the attack? Chance creation, finishing, consistency, scoring goals, opportunities.
I would say, given the last month being more fresh than anything, a gracious C-. We saw Hartle 9 goals and 4 assists. We had
Klaus with 10 goals.
10 goals and assists, or 2 assists, I think.
McSorley with 4.
McSorley with 4 was random as hell. I think it was from that standpoint, those 2 guys obviously carried us, and Lowen had a couple really good contributions. Salio didn't score that many goals. Whoever else played on the right didn't score many goals. We got a Sangbin 1 or 2 at the very end of the season. So, without having wingers to help support that attack, you're not going to come out with much. I think Klaus did more with less than what was provided to him. And you think if we had a consistent team at all, if we were even mid-table, he's going to have 15 goals.
Yeah, totally.
He's going to be in those positions. And if we're a better team that has more offensive threat and possession stats, he's going to score more. So I think a C- in my mind is just enough to pass you. but the team's got to rally around that and get better.
Winks, what are you giving the attack?
You hit it on the head. That's what I had as well. That was almost the highest grade I have across all of those topics listed.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Moving into the midfield, what do you have?
I have a C, so this is my highest rated. And it's really on the backs of, positive moments, not even games, but positive moments from Hartle and Lowen. I think, Hartle and a few others did well, but there was just kind of like the rest of our team, as in the season as a whole, there was just very little consistency, and we didn't have a lot of depth like many positions there as well. But I think Hartle carries this midfield grade to a C, in the way that he stepped into the creative role that he did.
Yeah.
What did you guys have? B for brutal? Okay.
I had a D, just like, not only from results, but also I just try to look at like what were we trying to accomplish in the midfield. We rarely ever had possession of the ball or made good decisions in the midfield. We had a constantly rotating midfield 3 or midfield 2, and partially that's due to injury, but even without injury, it's like we couldn't figure out what version of Leuven, Morales, Ostrak, Durkin, sometimes Wallum, sometimes Hartle, like we just never had any solidified stuff in the midfield. So I had a D.
Yeah, I think I would give 2 grades based on whether or not Leuven was playing. Like,
yeah, good call.
A C when he's on, a D when he's off, because there was just nothing else besides him that was ever consistent or at least competent in how to play and when to play it. So I think I'll just roll the.
I do think in certain situations too, these grades can be altered via the success rate of this press that we tried to do, especially after the management change. I think that there was a lot of lost opportunities for our midfield to make things happen when our our press was just getting run through like cones. So, I think part of the reason I gave it a C was, there are people on both sides of the ball, or sorry, both ends of the pitch opposite to them that are supposed to help them facilitate and make things happen. But it felt like a lot of times, when our midfield did get the ball, rotating constantly or not, they didn't always have the best people, in front or behind them to help make those things happen.
Yeah. How many goals did we let up to just from like our midfielders not tracking their run at the top of the box?
Yeah.
Like just insane. Which leads us to defense. I started off with a D- on defense. Similar to your last note of like sometimes like the midfielders weren't helped out by the attackers or the defenders.
Versa.
There's definitely sometimes the defenders were just,
left
hung out
island
to dry. But man, just abysmal. Really, really bad defending almost the entire year.
Yeah, I think if anything, when you can credit Olaf with, we couldn't score goals, obviously, at all. That was the number one issue. We weren't giving a ton up at the beginning of the season. So if there's any bright spot for one specific location on the pitch, it was those, first few games that if you're just not scoring goals, you're not going to, you can consistently lose 1-0 and your defense still be okay if you're not scoring. So I think I'm going to go with a D+.
Ooh, a D.
At the end of the season, too, dude, like we're still having to win by like 3-2, 3-2, 2-2. Like we bring in this fall cat, his brain turns off every once in a while.
Oh my god,
it's not on.
How many games did we lose in like the last 5 minutes of the game where we lost a lead? Man, like I forgot about that.
Dude, the one we tied in LAFC to that Bowaga 5th minute winner. It was like. Dude, it was a tie. It was an equalizer, but I was like, bro, park the bus, or like dude.
The whenever LAFC came to City Park and whoever just like dropped off of Sonny 15 yards and just let him walk into the box and pick up his head, just crazy,
unreal.
Our last two grades are the coaching staff and the front office. You can give both of your grades.
Both Fs.
Just really bad. Really, really, really bad. Technically, I gave a coaching grade of a D because I think Critchley was pretty average as an interim, but Olaf dug us in such a bad place we could never recover. But the front office is for sure an F for me. Front office, we said it earlier, just royally fucked us for this season, from the roster construction to the mid-season deals that we did. It's bad. Really, really, really bad. Nothing good. And I think that gives us an average rating of a D for the season, which...
Well, when you finish second to last, it's kind of what you're going to expect.
As we wrap, is the last question for you guys is there any genuine optimism for 2026? Is there anything that you're kind of holding your hat on? Because we are delusional footy fans at the end of the day. All of us are. We support teams, halfway across the world that we wake up for at all hours of the day, stay up till all hours of the night, supporting, researching. We're delusional in that fact. And so there has to be some sort of thing that we're clinging to into 2026. What is that for you?
For me, it's only optimism if we commit to this very clear need for a rebuild. And I think it can get dangerous if we try to rebuild while competing. I think we've seen it in the Premier League very often too, where, clubs don't take a rebuild seriously, and especially big six clubs that are meant to be playing in Europe during their prem season. Sometimes we see our clubs try and do too much. So for me, I'm optimistic if if the front office or the eventual coaching staff give fans a clear blueprint of the direction that they want the team to head. I think a lot of what happened this season also flat out just cannot happen again, because we saw it in, you guys especially being season ticket holders saw it, in the abandonment of many of the fans, at least going to the games, not necessarily watching them. I went to 4 or 5 home games this year, and it was, exactly like what you guys have
More
talked
than I
about.
went to.
Yeah, where it's
even as a season ticket holder,
a lot emptier than the last 2 seasons have been. So, make the blueprint clear, and just, I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
just figure it the
100%.
fuck out.
The only optimism there can be is with what we have available to us in roster spots. Like that's it. Like there's not, we're not looking at, wow, thank God we've got these core guys got back, and we do. There's a few guys that we've listed that we are excited about, but you're spot on, Winks. Like there's got to be excitement around the players that are coming in, and we've got to feel comfortable in a new coach. Like solidify those two pieces. I will absolutely get up for the season opener next year. Like I'm not, don't worry about my support level. I'm a season ticket holder. I'm going to go to a ton of games, but I'm going to not feel the need if we lose our first 12. You know what I mean? Like it's just got to be, it's got to be reasonable at the beginning of the season. We can't go on a crazy skid. I don't even really want us to go on an amazing run. Like I just want to be a little bit consistent, see an identity, see positions on the field that we went out, bought players for, playing fine, playing well. That's it, dude. I think the title of this podcast could be just, I'm asking for the bare minimum. Like I just want to see competency. So that's the only optimism, because frankly, I'm a sad sack football fan. I support Tottenham Hotspur, and I have for a long time. So I've never really had a whole lot of things to really get me up on. So you got to find it early. It's got to be in the off season. You got to make the move, and we all have to feel comfortable with it, because they've not been able to do that.
I agree with you. That for me is where any ounce of optimism that I have is just in the fact that we have open roster spots, and I hope that we take that seriously heading into next year, because otherwise it's going to be real bad, fellas. It's going to not be good at all. I really feel like we're a championship club in the sense where like guys are only signed to like 1 year, maybe 2 year contracts, and every single year they get rid of many guys, and it's all about how can you construct a roster. And I don't know, if I was looking at sporting directors, maybe I would look over there at the championship because they have to do this every single year. But that's that. But gentlemen, I encourage, or I'm just grateful for you both sticking in that conversation for the last hour. It's tough talking about St. Louis City at the moment, but rest assured, this will probably be the last time that we talk about them, probably for a month. My guess is middle of December is when we'll get some sort of announcement regarding the head coach, whether that's Critchley or somebody else, or Hackworth or somebody else. So
also, it can't be either of those guys.
Let's
just full stop, please. Yeah.
It can't be either of those guys, but we will be back next week with another weekend of Premier League to talk through.
Banger weekend, too.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I'm super excited for. Unfortunately, as a United fan, we have like the longest international break. Like we played the 6:30 on Saturday, and we don't play till Monday of like next week. So it's like quite literally the longest international break that you can have. But I'll be getting up for the Saturday, Sunday games. Don't you worry. Make sure you check us out on all of our social media platforms, the YouTube, the Twitter, the Instagram, TikTok, etc. Hoove, winks. Until next week. Cheers, fellas.
Cheers, lads.
Cheers, lads.